In honour of the biggest fight of 2025, Bud vs Canelo, I've decided to give my fellow fight fans a crash course on the history of the super middleweight division. The division's had it all, Hall of Famers on the slide to the best fighters pound for pound on planet Earth, and more than a few savage wars. Our story begins in 1984, a year of big hair, shoulder pads, and the IBF deciding boxing didn't have enough weight classes. So boom, the super middleweight division was born, 168 pounds. And who became the first champion? None other than Murray Sutherland, a proud Scot who'd been getting absolutely leathered at light heavyweight, and he fancied his chances against smaller human beings. Murray boxed clever against Ernie Singletree, he nicked a decision and raised the IBF belt like it was haggis in trophy form. So we roll into 1985, but unfortunately Sutherland's reign has lasted about as long as a fry up in front of a hungry heavyweight. Along came Chon Pow Park, a Korean slugger with all the finesse of a sledgehammer in a phone box. Park chopped Murray down and treated the IBF title like it was a national treasure. Over the next few years he defended it against likes of Roy Gums, a guy who deserved this title shot like my cat deserves a Nobel Peace Prize. And fight fans, I don't have a cat. An Italian-American Vinny Curto, who was managed by Sylvester Stallone no less. Sadly, Stallone was as useful in Curto's corner as he had been in Apollo Creed's corner in Rocky IV. 1986, are you still with us? Good, because Park is still the champion. Battering challengers across Asia like a man trying to prove a point to his in-laws. He was knocking out names faster than British fans could mispronounce them. And while the talent pool was shallow, not bridgerweight shallow, but close, Park looked the part. Meanwhile, the WBA was starting to eye the new division like it was a half-price kebab on the way home from a pub. So in 1987, Chon Pow Park clearly fancied a change of scenery. So he ditched the IBF belt like an old pair of gloves and picked up the WBA version by flattening Jesus Galandro in 2 rounds. Not bad for a guy who boxed like a windmill in a thunderstorm. Meanwhile, Graziano Roccagiani, whose name sounds like a rejected pasta dish, beat Vince Bulwer to grab the vacant IBF title. The German was a strong southpaw with a chin carved from granite. He also brought some German precision to the division. In 1988, Park, now on his revenge tour, made the classic boxing mistake. He fought a guy who had already beat him, Foley Obel, a Venezuelan tank who shared the ring with marvellous Marvin Hagler. Obel was supposed to be past it, instead he iced Park in 11 to win the WBA belt. That's karma with a jab cross. Over to the WBC. They handed Sugar Ray Leonard their first super middleweight belt for stopping Donny Lalonde in a bizarre bout fought at 2 weight classes at once. The WBO also launched with Tommy Hearns as their inaugural champion when he outscored James the Heat Kitchen over 12 rounds. Hearns and Leonard, as always, were like Carl Lewis and Ben Johnson, but this time they were chasing who could win the most belts in the most weight classes, so the WBA and WBC were more than willing to help these Hall of Famers. And in 1989, the 2 faded Hall of Famers duked it out, and they gave us a barn burner, fight of the year no less. Hearns dropped Leonard twice, but the judges thought a draw sounded funnier. Sugar Ray followed it up by sleepwalking past Roberto Duran, in what can only be described as 12 rounds of social distancing. In the same year, the WBA got a new champion when Inchul Bak, another Korean slugger, stopped Foley Obel in 11 rounds. In 1990, Leonard called it a day again, and the WBC title was handed to Mario Galvano, an Italian who boxed like he was late for a train. He beat Dario Mattotoni for the vacant title. Elsewhere, Christophe Tiozzo, a classy Frenchman with a punch, took the WBA title from Inchul Bak. Viva la France! The Hitman also returned to the ring to defend his WBO title, outscoring Michael Lajide over 12 rounds. Meanwhile, after 3 successful title defences, the most notable being outscoring Sugar Boy Malinga, Graziano Roccagiani vacated the IBF Championship and moved up to light heavyweight. Classy American box puncher Lindell Holmes, who had previously lost a close title fight against Chon Pow Park, picked up the vacant title when he won a majority decision over former IBF middleweight boss Frank Tate. Before the year was out, Holmes had made 2 successful defences, stopping Kyle Sullivan in Nunn and outscoring that man, Sugar Boy Malinga, over 12. 1991, enter Victor Cordoba, a Panaman destroyer who smashed Teozzo to win the WBA crown. Cordoba showed that power again when he stopped future champion Vincenzo Nardiello in 11 rounds. Over at the IBF, Lindell Holmes made another defence number 3, when he outscored Antonio Baird on a 12-round split decision. However, in his next fight, he was sunk with a body shot by the younger, fitter, super upright, super aggressive Darren Van Horn, the schoolboy, who dropped and stopped him with an 11th round body shot. Van Horn made 1 successful defence, stopping John Jarvis in 3 rounds. Galvano, meanwhile, kept plodding on with his WBC title. Meanwhile, the WBO and Tommy Hearns had parted ways, and it led to an absolute epic for the title. Chris Eubank Sr. versus Michael Watson. An epic war. Watson ahead on points, scored a knockdown in the 11th round, only for Chris to get off the deck and floor Watson with his very next punch, a brutal uppercut. Watson was down heavily, but was saved by the bell. He came out for the 12th round, but Eubank was all over him. The referee stopped the fight, and Chris had pulled off a miracle. Unfortunately for Watson, a world-class contender, he would suffer brain injuries in this fight, but I'm glad to say he's made a remarkable recovery over the years. 1992 started fast and violent. Around the Blade Barkley obliterated Darren Van Horn in just 2 rounds to win the IBF belt in January. The schoolboy just wasn't a match for the ex-Bronx gang leader. Meanwhile, in the UK, Chris Eubank was on his world tour with his WBO strap. He scraped past the dangerous Thulani Sugar Boy Malinga by a whisker, flattened poor and undeserving John Jarvis, then won a dire 12-rounder against Ron Essett, before proving he was one of the best in the division by outscoring one of the best in the division, the punching postman Tony Thornton, over 12 tough rounds. He ended the year by outscoring Juan Carlos Gimenez. Across Portugal, Glasgow and Manchester, 5 defences in a year, proper old school. But it was clear to all Eubank fans that his killer instinct just wasn't there anymore. Over in Vegas, Michael Nunn slicked his way to the WBA belt, nicking a razor-thin split decision over Victor Cordoba. It was tense, tactical, but Nunn danced just enough to grab the gold. Then came Nigel Benn, who marched into Italy like a gladiator. He cut up Mario Galvano and came back with a WBC title. Later in the year, he stopped Nicky Piper in front of a roaring London crowd. Clinical, brutal Benn. We kick off 1993 with James Toney, who mugged around Barkley for the IBF title. No cigar chomping slow motion Barkley here, just Toney rolling that shoulder, dropping counters and making a statement. Toney defended the title in October against Tony Thornton, a man built like a fridge, twice as durable. But Toney didn't blink. School was in session, and the punching postman was the pupil. Meanwhile, over at the WBO, Chris Eubank was turning defences into a national pastime. First, he outclassed former champion Lindell Holmes, one-sided. Then came the real drama. Ray Close up in Belfast. The European champion forced the draw. Then came the mega one. Nigel Benn 2. 42,000 at Old Trafford. No roof, no chill. Eubank boxed, Benn brawled, and the judges threw their hands up in the air. Another draw, 2 belts, no resolution. While those two were busy playing tug-of-war, Michael Nunn was quietly running the WBA division like it was his personal fiefdom. He beat Cordoba, soundly this time, Morgan, Crawford Ashley, whose ribs he broke, and Merkai Sosa, like he was clocking him for wear. Back to the Dark Destroyer, he started the year by soundly outscoring former champ Mario Galvano, although he was rocked in the closing stages of the fight. He flattened journeyman Lou Gent in 4, reminding everyone that he still hit like a bus, and capped off his year by drawing with Chris Eubank, a decision that most thought Benn just nicked. In 1994, the WBA championship was passed around like a dodgy kebab. Michael Nunn, still looking silky, got ambushed by Steve Little. A 12-round upset that had jaws on the floor. Little was a journeyman. Then Little ran into Frankie Liles, and Liles said, "Cheers for the belt," and took it off him with a slick southpaw schooling. And just for good measure, Frankie proved he was for real when he survived a storming finish to outscore former champ Michael Nunn. Frankie had earned the title the hard way. Over in the WBO, Chris Eubank was having an up and down year. He tamed German technician Graciano Roccagiani, he edged out old rival Ray Close for good, then did next to nothing against Maurizio Armel and Don Shoma, leading many, especially in the British press, to think he'd lost both fights. He stopped British boss Sam Story, and then proved just how good he was when he showed those counter-punching skills and outscored Henry Wharton. 6 fights, 6 wins, still unbeaten. Say what you want about Eubank, but in 1994, he was putting in the work. Meanwhile, the WBC title belonged to Nigel Benn, and the Dark Destroyer was still bringing the smoke. He beat Henry Wharton on point, though the York man gave him hell in a brutal war of attrition. Benn then outscored Juan Carlos Jimenez with controlled aggression and pure spite. However, most agreed that the best in the division at the time was James Toney. The IBF kingpin dismantled the previously unbeaten Tim Littles with surgical precision, then scored a brutal knockout of a former light heavyweight boss, Prince Charles William, to round off the year. No nonsense, just class. Toney was making greatness look casual. So, fight fans, that's the first 20 years of the super middleweight division, and things are only going to get more interesting. So join us again next week for the next part of this epic saga. And if you haven't already, join the channel, do what you got to do. And I'll see you later, fight fans.